Well, I was going to pose that question because some people say, oh, they differentiate between what was done before the elections. They consider that that was all around campaigns, but what was done on election day for them is the actual vote buying. Do you make that distinction?
Not really. Inducements to the inducements. Whether I give it to you the day before or I promised you. In fact, making a promise is against the law. Making a promise that, oh, if you vote for me, I'll give you the money, even if you do it tomorrow.
What we heard was that, you know, even on election day, perhaps they moved their kiosks a little further away from the polling units. But they had agents who were able to verify if indeed people were voting for the parties that they had promised to vote, and then, you know, reward them right after the voting.
There are reports, for example, that the voters themselves compromised their own secrecy by showing how they voted. Sleight of hand. While you know you vote in secret, but you cast your ballot in the open. You drop it in the ballot box in the open, and some by sleight of hand now kind of show.
Some even you take pictures of it, from what we hear.
Yes, we discourage. We cannot stop people. Definitely, we discourage the use of camera phones into the polling booths. That came about 4 years ago in Osun State, where a party insisted that people should be allowed to take their phones. We critically looked at it and say, there must be a motive for this. It's not just to protect your votes. It's actually a way of going to show some other third party, this is the way I voted, possibly for inducement. So we're working with the security agents. What more can we do? Administratively, we have to keep configuring the polling unit such as you do not disclose how you voted. It's an offense for an official or any other person to compromise your own secrecy. But oddly enough in the law, I can show anybody my vote. So there's nothing much we can do about that, where deliberately the person now decides to publicly reveal how he or she has voted. We discourage that, but I don't know whether through our guidelines and maybe further tinkering with the law, something can be made about that. But technically, I cannot, if I decide to vote and want to show how I voted, I cannot be stopped from doing that technically.
Okay, now let's go to, let's talk about the budget, which is, for some people they say it's high. I mean, the British High Commissioner, believed that the figures were on the high side.
But he later corrected himself and said it doesn't lie in him to see whether it's expensive
he did say that,
but in Britain, it is expensive.
For the average Nigerian, when you see such a figure, you're like, what is INEC doing with such an amount of money? We would think that incrementally, the amount of money we spend perhaps on infrastructure and a number of other things should come down, especially since we've bought card readers, we've bought DDC machines and things of the sort.
Yes.
Can INEC really justify, asking, it would seem that the budget doesn't really come down? Why is this the situation?
Well, you have to look at the budget in real terms. You have to look at the value of the Naira, for example, today and what it was 4 years ago. So contextually, you must look at things. And this is the totality of the budget. The breakdown, when it comes to that, you'll see the breakdown of it. As I said, a lot of it is actually in personnel costs. In many countries, you use volunteers. It's like jury service, you use volunteers to conduct elections, and they're not really paid. But here, to train them, you have to give them an allowance. You have to give them transport to get there. You have to give them refreshment. To get them deployed on election day, you must pay an allowance, both transport and feeding allowance.
Have we tried volunteers and we didn't get any?
Oh, certainly did. In 2006, an advert was placed by the Commission in many national dailies and asking for quality volunteers, retired civil servants, people from the organized private sector. It did not work. Very, very few.
Have we tried again?
Since then,
especially since young people are now more aware of the political process and they'd like to get more involved.
Yes, but this is part of the thing about that. Recall that when we used to use teachers and other people, there were allegations that INEC was using partisan people. Now, when you have volunteers, with the way we operate, most likely it will be flooded by people whose partisanship I cannot vouch for, whose integrity I cannot vouch for. But with youth corps, for example, we all know that these are young, dynamic, patriotic people, and as far as we know, they do not belong to political parties. They're fresh out of universities. They're young men, vibrant. And you can account for them. And if they do anything untoward, we always liaise with the hierarchy of the NYSC scheme. So they're accountable to them. But I cannot say the same if I ask for volunteers, and with the high rate of unemployment, a lot of young people come and possibly unemployed. Who do I hold them accountable? When anything goes wrong, who do I report them to? How do I discipline them? How do I control them? And how am I sure they're not sponsored by politicians and political parties or candidates?
Mr. Uzi, you've already mentioned that out of the 242 billion, that much of this has to do with personnel costs, etc.
189 is INEC. The others are for security agencies.
Okay, now, given that, how much can you tell us in terms of the breakdown of how that money is going to be spent? How much can you actually give us insight into? Because obviously, with these ideas that it's too much, etc., you know, how much of this is logistics? How much, you know, there's so many questions. Just try and give us some insight into that.
I haven't seen that breakdown, actually. We did submit a bill. We have been going backwards and forwards with the executive and the budget office. Submitted a bill. We moderated it. They asked us to change certain things and query certain things. We did budget defense severally. And we will still do budget defense for the National Assembly. So those details will come out. So I honestly don't know what the final figure and how it's calibrated. But I can give you the heads or some of the heads covered by those budgets. And I've listed some of them already. I mentioned the personnel costs. We have to get some more card readers, and we have to enhance those card readers for the elections. Now, I'll give you an insight into something. When we started the CVR, Communal Voter Registration process, we're using machines that were purchased in 2010. Now, you do know that your laptops purchased 8 years ago, even in the best storage conditions, doesn't work as efficiently, as effectively as it did 8 years ago. So some of those machines were slower. Technology had moved on. By the time we were able to acquire a few more, we could register 4 fingers, 2 thumbs together, for example, 8 fingers together, and 2 thumbs, for example. The old ones, you had to do one each individual to capture the 2 thumbs and the 8 fingerprints. So with the improvement in technology, so we have to enhance the card reader. So and it's all imported. We have to print more permanent voters cards. We have to get things like logistics. We have to hire vehicles. We have to revamp the camps that we use, which helps us in our logistics delivery. We have to wire the things where they're in public buildings, which are not used at night. Often we have to buy generators. We have to buy mattresses where the people will sleep. We have to all sorts
that's very detailed.
Yes, those are the kind of things.